Welcome to our podcast. I am Primus, and you are listening to Behind the Scenes at Octavius Reviews. We hope that you enjoy our broadcast and think of us kindly. For a glossary of terms and nomenclature, please see the description. Also, check our site for more detailed information on the games and for links to the demos, as a convenience, of course. Thank you for listening.
Welcome to episode 17. This is Behind the Scenes at octaviusreviews.com. I am your host, Janice, and I am joined by my co-host, Primus. So, where should we begin?
Honestly, I stumbled across some incredible fan-generated fiction the other day. Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine stories, written with more nuance and grit than half the official material. Then I noticed Warhammer has its own dedicated animation channel now, and I started wondering whether some of these fan concepts might actually become a series. The whole grim saga of humanity's subjugation of the universe, its inability to free itself from religious zealotry and corruption, it is perfect for a long-form adaptation.
It is wild how far the franchise has come. 30 years ago, it was a niche tabletop curiosity. Now it is a multimedia empire. And yes, it is completely possible we will see a full animation. Netflix, Amazon, maybe even one of the newer platforms. The appetite is there.
Exactly. A story this dense, this morally bleak, this operatic, it is ripe for a studio to pick up. Anything can happen when the lore is this juicy.
Without a doubt, dramatic stories about betrayal and injustice really do sell in 2026. Primus, have you ever played Space Marine?
I have actually. I own the Anniversary Edition, but I stopped playing it because I am built for PC controls. My hands are trained for keyboard and mouse. I used to be able to play with a gamepad, but that skill evaporated over time. Relearning it felt too tedious, so I shelved the game even though I liked the world.
That is the thing about this franchise. Even when the mechanics do not click, the universe does. People stay because the lore is magnetic, and that is why the fanbase keeps expanding it. They fill in the gaps the studio leaves behind.
And those gaps are everywhere. The official material gives you the broad strokes, but the fans build the connective tissue. They write the politics, the theology, the psychology. They take the raw ingredients and turn them into something with actual emotional weight.
Which is why the fandom has become such a force. They are not just reacting to the universe, they are shaping it. They are defining what it should feel like, how it should evolve, and what stories deserve to be told.
And that brings us to the real point. You know, every time people talk about fan influence, they default to the same tired line about community feedback.
As if studios are sitting there politely reading surveys. The reality is much more direct. Fans build the prototypes. Mods are the proving grounds. The community shows the studio exactly what the next game should look like, and the studio quietly absorbs it.
Exactly. It is not feedback. It is free R&D. Look at any major franchise with a long tail. The community invents the mechanics that actually work, and the studio eventually canonizes them. Half the time, the fans are fixing systems the developers never had the budget or courage to touch. The mod scene becomes the unofficial design department.
And the funniest part is how predictable the cycle is. A mod introduces a new faction, or a deeper economic simulation, or a lore rewrite that actually makes sense. It blows up. The studio pretends not to notice. Then, 2 years later, the next official release quietly includes the exact same idea, just wrapped in corporate packaging.
The talent pipeline is even more blatant. A fan animator or writer produces something that hits harder than the official material, and suddenly they are hired. It is the most direct form of canonical absorption. The studio does not just take the idea, they take the person who proved the idea works.
And all of this feeds into the tonal boundary the community enforces. Fans create a collective consensus about what the universe should feel like. If thousands of people write stories that lean into grim psychological horror, the studio cannot suddenly pivot to cheerful action. They will get annihilated. The tone becomes a constraint the developers have to obey.
That is the part studios never admit. They act like they are the arbiters of canon, but they are actually responding to the emotional resonance the community has already defined. When fans obsess over a minor character or a tiny piece of world building, that element gets elevated. Not because the studio had a grand plan, but because the community proved the concept has traction.
And yet, there is always that legal wall. They cannot lift a fan script verbatim. They cannot copy a specific mod wholesale. So, they do the next best thing. They absorb the macro trends, the tone, the mechanical preferences, the structural desires. They reshape the official universe from the top down without ever acknowledging the source.
Which brings us to the Sisters of Battle, the perfect case study. For decades, they were treated like decorative zealots, a faction used to make the Space Marines look more heroic by comparison. The "none with a gun" stereotype was not just shallow, it was commercially limiting. The studio assumed a female-led grimdark narrative could not carry a major project.
Meanwhile, the fans were building an entire subculture around them. Writers, modelers, animators, all exploring the psychological tension of unaugmented humans facing cosmic horror. The fandom saw the human pathos the studio ignored. They wrote the corruption, the schisms, the trauma, the theology. They built the version of the faction that actually had narrative weight.
And that is the moment where canonical absorption becomes unavoidable. When the community spends 20 years developing the faction the studio neglected, the studio eventually has to acknowledge it. Not because they want to, because the fan-driven version is the one with cultural momentum. They are creating the blueprint the studio eventually follows.
And this is where Warhammer becomes a perfect case study, because the franchise is built on a paradox. It is a universe defined by rigid canon, yet it evolves almost entirely through fan-driven reinterpretation. The corporate machine pretends to be the arbiter of lore, but it is constantly reacting to the emotional resonance the community establishes.
That emotional resonance is the real boundary.
Which is exactly why the next stage of this conversation belongs in Episode 2. Because once you understand the historical void and the fan reinterpretation, you can see how the technological shift, Unreal Engine 5, MetaHuman, independent animators, forced the corporate machine to capitulate. So let us get into the part that really belongs here, because this is where the fandom's fingerprints are clearest. The Sisters of Battle did not evolve because Games Workshop had a grand narrative plan. They evolved because the fans refused to accept the version the studio kept pushing.
Exactly. The historical void around the Sisters is one of the strangest gaps in the entire Warhammer canon. You have this faction with enormous thematic potential, but for decades they were treated like decorative zealots. They were the grim backdrop, the tragic scenery, the faction you used to show how bad things were before the Space Marines arrived to actually win the war.
And that none with a gun stereotype was not just shallow. It was structurally limiting. It flattened them into a single emotional register: eternal zealotry, eternal purity, eternal martyrdom. No interiority, no psychological tension, no human stakes, just liturgical fire and screaming.
Meanwhile, the fans were looking at the exact same material and seeing something completely different. They saw unaugmented humans facing cosmic horror. They saw the tension between faith and trauma. They saw the political corruption of the ecclesiarchy. They saw the theological fractures between the orders. They saw the human cost of being the only faction in the Imperium expected to be both devout and disposable.
And that is the key point. The fans saw humanity. The studio saw ornamentation. The fans wrote stories about doubt, guilt, indoctrination, redemption, and schism. The studio wrote flavor text about holy fire. The gap between those two interpretations is the entire reason the faction evolved.
And if you want the clearest example of how powerful that fan reinterpretation became, you only need to look at the story of Vienthia, because her story is the perfect symbol of the void the studio left behind, and the emotional depth the fandom built to fill it.
Yes, this is the one that always stops people, the one that proves how good the fandom really is.
Vienthia begins as a sister of the valorous heart, devout, disciplined, unquestioning. She uncovers corruption within her order, not heresy born from malice, but compromise born from fear. She reports it. She does what a sister is supposed to do, and her reward is betrayal. Her canoness condemns her, accuses her of pride, and orders a memory purge, not to heal her, to erase her.
And the purge does not cleanse. It destroys?
Exactly. It wipes out her identity, but not the pain. It leaves her with fragments of trauma and no context. She remembers betrayal, but not the faces. She remembers devotion, but not the doctrine. She remembers fear, but not the cause. She becomes a hollow vessel of instinct and suffering. And then her order abandons her. They put her on a transport and send her away like refuse.
And this is where the fandom steps in. Because the studio never wrote stories like this. The fans did.
She ends up on Fenris, half dead, half mad. The wolves take her in because she fights like a wounded animal trying to survive. She heals slowly. Her memories do not return, but her instincts do. She prays without knowing the words. She reacts to symbols she cannot name. She carries trauma she cannot explain.
And she becomes something liminal. Not a sister, not a wolf, something between.
Yes, and the tragedy is that she belongs nowhere. The Imperium rejects her. The wolves admire her, but do not understand her. She is suspended between two worlds, defined only by the pain of what she lost and the ferocity of what she became.
And then the revelation.
Fate, perhaps. During a chaos raid, a sorcerer dredges up her suppressed memories, and suddenly, everything returns. The corruption, the lies, the purge, the abandonment, the betrayal. It breaks her, but it also frees her. She understands that she did not fail her order failed her.
And that is when the wolves give her the name.
The she-wolf. Not as a title, as an identity. As recognition of a woman forged by betrayal, shaped by exile, and reborn through ferocity. She never returns to the sororitas. She never fully joins the wolves. She becomes a myth, a symbol of the cost of devotion in a universe that punishes loyalty. And this is the point. Vienthia is not canon. She is fan-forged. She is the proof that the fandom rebuilt the sisters into something compelling. And she is the perfect example of why the reinterpretation mattered. Because once the fans created characters like Vienthia, characters with interiority, conflict, trauma and agency, the studio could not go back to caricature. At the very least, you would hope they wouldn't. I want to say something that might sting a little. In my opinion, it is a sellout from the fan side to write that Vienthia gets her memories back. If we are being honest, that deviates from reality. It shows how the fans began to understand that her story was a little too real, and they wanted to ease her suffering. But in reality, she would never recover. She would adapt. She would transform. She would become a different person. Because that is what people do when they are broken by systems that hold power over them. So on one side, it is a respectable storyline. But on the other, it caters to the human need for order and justice, which is the foundation of magical thinking.
So let us shift gears and talk about the part of the sororitas that people often underestimate, the political machinery behind them. Because the Adepta Sororitas are not just warriors, they are the enforcement arm of one of the most powerful institutions in the Imperium.
Exactly. The ecclesiarchy is not simply a church. It is a political empire disguised as a religious authority.
We need to talk about how the sisters actually fight, because their battlefield doctrine is one of the most misunderstood parts of the faction. People assume they are just zealots with flamers, but their combat philosophy is far more structured and psychologically deliberate.
The first thing you have to understand is that the sisters do not fight like space marines. They cannot. They are not augmented. They do not have superhuman strength, reflexes, or durability. Their doctrine compensates for that by combining discipline, faith conditioning, and overwhelming short-range firepower. It is a style built around controlled aggression. And that controlled aggression is key. The sisters are trained to advance with absolute conviction, but not recklessness. Their formations are tight. Their firing lines are precise. Their squad cohesion is rigid. They rely on synchronized volleys, coordinated pushes, and layered support. It is a doctrine designed to maximize human capability in a universe built for monsters. And then there is the psychological component. The sisters weaponize faith. Not metaphorically, literally. Their belief is a tactical asset. The miracle dice system in the tabletop is not just a mechanic. It is a representation of how their doctrine works. Their conviction allows them to push past fear, pain, and uncertainty. It lets them take risks normal soldiers would never attempt.
That risk-taking is not random. It is ritualized. The sisters are conditioned to see sacrifice as strategic. Martyrdom is not a tragedy. It is a resource. A fallen sister strengthens the resolve of the squad. A moment of suffering becomes a moment of tactical advantage. It is a battlefield psychology built around the idea that devotion can alter outcomes. However, I feel that sort of concept of martyrdom plays out, at least in my thinking, more of a way to justify the losses and to cope with the struggle. The notion that they would throw their lives away for their emperor god who mostly doesn't even know they exist. Sure, he has heard of the faction. As the sisters are often portrayed as devotee, I think the reality is much darker.
Yeah, but at the same time as it is with true believers, that psychology shapes their squad dynamics. A sister superior is not just a commander. She is a spiritual anchor. Her presence stabilizes morale, focuses aggression, and maintains discipline. The squad fights as a single emotional unit, the one thing they can see and therefore trust. When one falters, the others compensate. When one excels, the others follow. It is a collective mindset. You know, in those hard times, they are telling themselves, let's just get through the next 10 minutes. Battlefield roles reflect that commitment. Retributors anchor firing lines. Dominions spearhead aggressive pushes. Celestians act as elite bodyguards. Seraphim disrupt enemy formations with aerial strikes. Every unit reinforces the same philosophy: advance with purpose, strike with conviction, and maintain cohesion at all costs.
Cohesion is what separates them from other Imperial forces. Guardsmen rely on numbers, Marines rely on augmentation, Mechanicus forces rely on technology. The sisters rely on unity. Their doctrine is built around the idea that a squad acting with perfect faith can achieve what individual strength cannot.
Unity is why their battlefield psychology is so compelling. They are fragile compared to the monsters they fight, but they do not break. They do not retreat. They do not hesitate. Their doctrine teaches them that fear is a test, pain is a lesson, and death is a form of victory. It is a mindset that makes them terrifying opponents.
The sisters are meant to be seen. Their armor, their iconography, their chants, their flames, all of it is psychological warfare. They project purity and conviction to destabilize enemies who rely on fear. They turn faith into intimidation.
That intimidation works because it becomes psychological warfare. It is what you expect from the weak, that need to project strength and ferocity. We are going to tear you into pieces, whatever it takes. When a survive or die mentality is all you have, that projection becomes a weapon. Chaos cultists, heretics, mutants, they crumble when confronted with unwavering devotion. Even Xenos forces underestimate them until they realize the sisters do not fight like humans. They fight like zealots who believe the Emperor is watching every bullet.
Let us talk about the part of the sisters' visual language is not decoration. Every symbol, every relic, every piece of armor is a political and theological statement.
Exactly. Their armor is iconography. It is propaganda. It is a walking sermon. The Imperium uses them as living symbols of purity, devotion, and righteous suffering. From the art that has been depicted, you sort of imagine that impression, and the iconography makes that explicit. Fleur-de-lis, purity seals, parchment prayers. They wear scripture the way other soldiers wear medals. Even their colours communicate doctrine. Martyred ladies black and red, bloody roses crimson, sacred roses white. Each palette expresses how an order interprets devotion. Their relics turn battlefields into cathedrals. The Simulacrum Imperialis, sacred banners, bone reliquaries, reminders that every sister fights under the Emperor's gaze. And that cathedral aesthetic transforms violence into ritual. Purging becomes sacrament. Their weapons, flamers, melters, bolters, are designed to look holy even when they are horrific. At the end of the day, they are leaning hard into the concept of true zealotry. Which puts me in mind of the historical precedent of the women of the Byzantine Varangian Guard auxiliaries, the women of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, or the Catholic military order's lay sisters. All of these groups were forged out of the notion that desperate times call for desperate measures. Though the historical reasons behind these real-world military orders differ, the comparison holds. Warhammer 40,000 is set in an intergalactic struggle between three species locked in an extinction bid for survival, a conflagration touching every level of humanity.
Under those circumstances, an easy life is a luxury few could afford. And that is the final layer of the sisters' architecture. Their aesthetic is not just style, it is identity, it is doctrine, it is propaganda, it is faith made visible. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the fan lore of Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine, which will probably become a movie or a series at some point. Fallout got a series, as did many others. I can feel this one coming sooner or later. Or maybe it just stays on Warhammer TV. Anyway, thanks for listening, and until next time.